How many hours a day do you spend scrolling on your phone? If it's less than 4.5 hours, you're better than most. This is according to Ofcom's latest survey, which looks into our internet habits. The Online Nation report also found only a third of us feel the internet is good for society. Let's talk to Chris Stoker-Walker, our resident tech expert. Hello, Chris.
Hi, Effie.
Right, give us the headlines on this one then.
Yeah, so obviously that huge amount of time, 4.5 hours, I think I probably bumped that up by about half an hour by myself in terms of that. Also, I think when we actually are spending that time and where we spend it is quite significant as well. So half of the time that we spend online is in the company of just two firms. So Alphabet, the parent company of Google, and also Meta, the company behind Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, and a whole clutch of other services that we use daily. So really, I think this kind of signifies the stranglehold, perhaps, that these companies and the products that they offer, YouTube and others amongst them, have on our online life, and the way in which they have the ability perhaps to shape what it is that we consume and how exactly we feel about those that we interact with online.
I heard somebody talking on Times Radio this morning about this survey, Chris, and they reminded me that back in the day, if you went on Instagram, there'd be a feature that said, OK, you're all caught up now on Instagram, you can go now. And of course, our world has changed completely, hasn't it? Because it has just become harder, and the tech companies have taught us how not to leave their services.
Yeah, we have now the endless scroll, which was an innovation brought in for Instagram, borrowed by TikTok, and now in use in pretty much every single social media app, which means you never do reach the bottom. You never are fully caught up. They find some other bit of content to show you. And that's not just because of the number of us starting to be online is increasing. So frankly, whereas before you might have had 10 or 20 friends on those social media platforms to start with, maybe growing up to a few thousand at most, posting maybe once a week, now we are all expected to try and engage and feed this endless stream of information by providing these life updates, sharing what it is that we want to say with the rest of the world. And it means that actually it becomes increasingly difficult to get out of it. And I suppose that's in part just because we've become normalized to the idea of becoming content creators of our own. It used to be that you would have world famous YouTubers or Instagrammers or TikTokers, whereas we're all kind of encouraged now to pick up our phones and give it a go ourselves.
Yeah, and it's wearisome, isn't it? We need to talk about VPN use as well, because the report is telling us something pretty interesting about VPN use. It's more than doubled.
Yeah, and I think this is an indication perhaps of the first early signs of the Online Safety Act, or the preparation for this implementation coming into force. And really it's, I suppose, a bit of a shot across the bows for the idea that this was suddenly going to reduce the risk of us accessing inappropriate websites, and particularly younger users. It kind of, I think, was manna from heaven for the VPN industry, because suddenly people who might not previously have known about this as an opportunity suddenly began to realize that this was open to them. And of course, VPN's not just used for trying to get around, blocks or bans that are implemented because various companies don't want to have to accede to the very stringent rules that we have in the UK now around the Online Safety Act, which was meant to tackle porn websites and other adult content, but also brought up in its dragnet some relatively innocuous websites. But actually, we realise that VPNs can be used for much more than that. So if you want to try and save a little bit of cash on a flight, I'm flying over to Austria for a little bit after Christmas at the minute and looking around for flights. I'm going to try and use a VPN to see if I can get a little bit of money knocked off my flight by pretending to be in Andorra or something like that. Sometimes they do actually work in that way.
And I've used them very successfully to try and access TV programmes in different parts of the world that have yet to arrive in this country, or that I'd have to pay more for to watch in this country. So I just put my hands up to that. I was interested by this final statistic, Chris, that 69% of children are also using the internet for things like ASMR to relieve anxiety. Is there actually, within that statistic, an element of good internet use? Is that a good news story, or does that worry you?
I think that's a good news story, provided that it's anxiety of the type that is very low level and not something that would need medical attention. The risk, I think, always with these sorts of things is Dr. Google is just a tap of the phone away, and increasingly with the use of AI chatbots like ChatGPT and others, we feel like we can get much more personalised medical advice. But these things are not designed to replace doctors, even though they might be used in that way by everyday users. So as long as those younger web browsers are visiting ASMR websites, frankly, just to kind of alleviate a little bit of tension, I don't see any issue with that. It's when it starts to become a little bit more serious and people are trying to, circumvent long waiting lists or things like that to go online, that it becomes a little bit more concerning. But
Yeah,
the fact
absolutely.
that that's done in comparison to kind of the terrible experience that many adults said they were having online is a good thing.
Yeah. Let's talk about Australia, because it's entirely relevant, isn't it, to this conversation? So Australia has become the first country in the world to ban under-16s from signing up to big social media platforms. Do you think, quite simply, Chris, that this will work? Because there is VPN use to consider. There is also the simple fact that already we know that quite a lot of kids in Australia have managed to get round this self-identification rule.
Yeah, some of whom we've heard from on Times Radio today. There was one who brilliantly said that their smartphone camera wasn't very good, so suddenly they do look like they're over 16, which is just a brilliant way of showing how these things can be subverted. No, don't really think that this is necessarily going to work. If there's a will, then there's a way, and with kids there is often a will for this sort of thing because, frankly, by banning social media, we are removing one of their key core social squares. Don't like to really quote Elon Musk fee, but he was right in saying that social media has become the de facto public square in which we all interact, and it is a vital lifeline for people who maybe can't meet each other in person all the time. And gosh knows that kids don't necessarily have all that many places that they can connect with offline these days because of the closure of third sector spaces, shopping malls, even just after school clubs. They don't really exist anymore. So increasingly those meetings are being pushed online, and kids will still want to do that. We're seeing that they want to do that, and even the threat of 49.5 million Australian dollars fine, something I think like 25 million pounds or so for each company that doesn't block these under 16s from their platform. Don't think that will necessarily win over the case here.
But it is an absolute truth, Chris, that an awful lot of kids would like more help in not having to use their phones so much. There are so many kids out there who are only on their phones because there's another person in the class who's on their phone. They're only on their phones because they haven't been given an alternative of something to do with their time. So we've got to remember that, haven't we?
We do, and I think it was really interesting hearing Lisa Nandy speaking on Times Radio Breakfast today, where she was saying the UK is largely likely ruled out the idea of implementing a similar ban here, and instead are listening to those younger demographics for what exactly they want. And you can argue about whether or not the people who are likely to be caught up in this decision legislatively should be the people that are dictating or calling the shots here. But actually, Lisa Nandy was explaining a really fascinating aspect, including actually the fears of younger girls online who say that they don't want these online spaces to disappear in the UK, in large part because, yes, unfortunately, they receive abuse, they receive inappropriate messages, but they see that being visible to other adults as being a strong check and balance against similar behaviour happening offline. So there are really more fundamental conversations, I think, to be had here than just should we ban or should we not ban. We need to think about how we interact with children in a social media and digital space, but also how we interact with them in the offline world as well.
Finally, OpenAI says their employees are saving on average an hour a day by making use of artificial intelligence. Now, is this in the know what's it Sherlock file here?
A little bit, and we should, take this with a heavy dose of salt because, of course, this is an AI company saying that their AI tools are fantastic. Yeah. But there is an element here that I think it does chime with what other people are saying. So 9,000 workers across 100 companies here saving up to an hour, although there were specific areas in which people found more benefits. They were talking about coding tools, so creating computer codes to design bits of software that can improve efficiencies in the long run, just not in the immediate term, were seen as really powerful as well. This survey basically looked at people around about a month after they started using these things and seeing whether or not they actually found benefits from it. A lot of them actually ended up inventing new work, which is quite a benefit, I think, for us who are worried about being displaced by AI. AI here was being used to do new tasks that are freed up the time for people to continue to do their work better. So some silver linings, I suppose, to that. But yeah, do take it a little bit of skepticism.
Yeah. You could never be replaced, Chris Stokell-Walker, and thank you very much indeed for your company. We always talk to Chris about tech advances and tech news on a Wednesday. If you ever have a question, and no question is too daft or too small or too big or too clever or too stupid, then do get in touch, because it's such an extraordinary horizon that we're all looking into at the moment. And Chris has definitely got some better focus glasses on than most of us. So send us an email, Jane and Fee at times.radio.